All right, so we had talked, Tyler, about Brian Robinson being traded, and obviously Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. There's been a lot with him, and it finally happened. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is going to take on a bigger role because Brian Robinson has been traded from the Washington Commanders to the San Francisco 49ers for a sixth-round pick. And obviously, like, this has major fallout for both teams. We talked a lot about the Washington side. If you haven't seen that episode, feel free to watch it. We talked about Austin Eckler, Bill Krosky-Merritt, and we talked about Chris Rodriguez. But what we didn't have a chance to talk about was the fallout from if he went traded and what his role would be. And now he's with the San Francisco 49ers, who already have an elite running back one, a guy that's a franchise pillar. You bring in this guy who was a third-round back in his contract year from Alabama, has had a good NFL career to start, and now we're not sure what this means, right? For fantasy value, you have Isaac Guerendo in the backfield, who's kind of looked the part as a splash play, but we haven't seen the consistency out of him. You get Brian Robinson, who's good enough in his own right to now back up Christian McCaffrey, who we've seen in this Snyder offense, Tyler. He's pretty much been a workhorse. Talk with me about your thoughts on this Brian Robinson to San Francisco 49ers trade.
Yeah, I think this is merely just a backup piece for Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't be concerned whatsoever with Christian McCaffrey. I know, like, maybe people might say some of the volume may get lost, like maybe just like some early down work here or there, but like there's no way, he's going to come in here and compete with Christian McCaffrey for touches. So for me personally, it's just a backup piece because when you look at the depth chart behind Christian McCaffrey, everybody's hurt, from Jordan James to Isaac Guerendo. I don't even know who the other guys are on the depth chart.
They're on IR.
There's so many players that are banged up there. So this was merely just, in my opinion, the depth piece. And it was a sixth-round draft pick. So maybe it can kind of keep Christian McCaffrey somewhat healthy too. Like they want to take some of the load off. But I'm not concerned whatsoever for Christian McCaffrey with this trade. And he's still an elite running back that I'm not worried about it. It's just now I would be concerned for Isaac Guerendo because I do think this is now like Brian Robinson is the clear backup behind him. But even then, like Brian Robinson, he's just never been a guy who's been involved in the receiving game. So I think that he's just an early down grinder. If something were to happen to CMC, he won't play on third downs, but that's fine because that's kind of what Jordan Mason was last year. Jordan Mason was, very solid in fantasy football. So I think he's the clear backup now to Christian McCaffrey, but in terms of Christian McCaffrey, I wouldn't be concerned whatsoever.
I don't know. This reminds me of a little bit more of, instead of this being a Jordan Mason type role for Brian Robinson, this reminds me a little bit more of a, hey, let's take care of CMC type role. Let's make sure he gets to the finish line. If we're trying to win a Super Bowl, you can't do that without Christian McCaffrey being healthy. And, it's easy to just say, like, Brian Robinson, he's going to step into this role and not be good. But I kind of think the opposite. I think that this is a workload management type role for Brian Robinson. I think he's going to still touch 10 to 12 carries a game, and we're going to see CMC. They talked about this last offseason, Tyler, where they said, hey, we want to manage Christian McCaffrey's workload. And they had the backs to do it, but we didn't actually get a chance to see it because he came into the season hurt. Now he's coming off of the injury. He's 29 years old. And I get that he's probably still elite when he plays, but there is the risk now of, hey, if something happens to Achilles, we don't have Christian McCaffrey at all anymore. Like, we miss at least a year with him, and probably his career is trending towards being done. So I think this is a clear move for me for the 49ers to get depth. And I think kind of are gone are the days where we see 25 touch Christian McCaffrey in the offense. And this feels more to me like a 15 to 20 touch guy, which for fantasy is still really good. I think Christian McCaffrey is still going to be an RB1. I just think we're going to be kind of missing out on that elite upside that we used to have with him back in the Carolina days.
No, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think that maybe like they don't want to give him the ball 25 times, but he's easily their best player on offense. Like, there's no question. So he's still going to be featured. And the other thing too is, if anything, I think Brian Robinson comes in here and he might take some of the early down work. Who cares about that? Like, who gives a shit? Fine, do that, please, because Christian McCaffrey will still have his amazing upside for the receiving. That's all we care about. And also the other part is I've heard people say maybe red zone back, no chance is he going to
No, I
be
don't think red zone
the
back.
red zone back whatsoever. Like
Red zone
Christian
opportunities, but not red zone back.
he won't be the guy. Like Christian McCaffrey will be the goal line back still. He'll be the primary pass catcher. He'll still be involved in the early downs. He'll still be the focal point on the offense. Maybe he doesn't have 25 point per game upside anymore. Maybe it's 23, but that like
I don't
I
know
still
if it's
think
that. Like that's the thing I think that I see out of this as a Niner fan. Like, no, as a Niner fan, just you don't want to give that an older back. We talk about older backs all the time, and because it's Christian McCaffrey and he's been good for so long, it's easy to be like, oh no, he can still be what he was. But like that's a different type of back because he's been injured. He's not the same size as a Derrick Henry. We see Joe Mixon dealing with lingering injuries right now. We're always quick to write off the early exit for these older running backs, but for whatever reason, Christian McCaffrey, we're like, oh no, he's first round asset. He could be 25 plus points per game. It's like, to me, this is a clear sign from the Niners organization that like we got to get through the season with Christian McCaffrey. He's had 3 years where he hasn't been able to finish more than half the season, and to me, that's a big risk.
If they're a team fighting to get into the playoffs, right? Will they not use their best player in offense as much as they possibly can?
You can still 100%. use him, but what good is he if he's not there on the field for you? He's no good for you.
What good is it if you can't get into the playoffs if he's not on the field? Like, who cares then?
Even last year, we only had one game last year, Tyler, where he had over 20 touches. One. And I know he didn't play very much, but that's still only one game where he had over 20 touches. I just think that
how many games did he play? 3?
He only played 4 or 5 games last year, but I just think that role for him is like long gone. Like you can't put that kind of workload on him and expect him to be healthy. Like, and you have Isaac Guerrero, who you drafted, who I'm sure will be back on the field at some point. You now trade for, like, why go trade for Brian Robinson, a guy
because literally everybody's hurt.
He's fighting for a contract, and you still give up a 6th-round pick. Like, I know it's not much draft capital, but you have to go get another running back. To me, that was a clear sign of like we need somebody to help this.
It was a clear sign that we need somebody behind Christian McCaffrey who's healthy because they literally have nobody. Like that to me, that's a clear sign. I don't know. I'm not concerned whatsoever. And I understand what you're saying. Like maybe they take some of the workload off and he instead goes down to 20 touches per game. But like, I didn't look at this trade and say, man, this is going to hurt Christian McCaffrey. No, like this does nothing for me for Christian McCaffrey. So you
still have him you're still taking him like top 7 to 10.
I picked 7. He should be off the board. Yes.
Yeah, see, that's too early for me. It already was too early for me. This hasn't really changed. I just expect a lower ceiling for sure out of him, and the risk is still baked in there. Maybe it's climbed up a little bit because you have another back now. The thing is, though, Tyler, so obviously with like Christian McCaffrey, pretty much keep him where you're at, right? Like I think if you were heading into drafts this weekend, considering Christian McCaffrey, if you valued him high, the same risk upside, it's still there for some people, right? And then I think it just raises the floor a little bit because now you do have a team that is cautiously going to be managing over the workload, in my opinion, at least. But for Brian Robinson, this was a player who was getting drafted as like an RB3. I think we can both agree here that like his value cratered with this trade.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, he should be closer to where Isaac Guerrero is going right now. I would have no interest in him. I mean, I guess I'd have interest if I'm like a drafted CMC. Sure, or you're just looking for a handcuff like in the later rounds. So yeah, I think you should be closer to like Isaac Guerrero, probably more like 12, probably around 13-ish is really where he should be going. I wouldn't take him anything.
So obviously, like, and he is I'll say this, he's not a very high upside because he doesn't catch the football, but he is an upside play if something were to happen to CMC. Yeah. Very good offense, could turn into an RB2 that would have a lot of volume opportunity for touchdowns. I don't know how much passing game work he would get, but you look at him and then you look at Tank Bigsby. It's like, I'm going to go Tank Bigsby. You look at him or you look at Braylon Allen. I'm going to go Braylon Allen. You look at him and, some of these other secondary options, he reminds me a lot of like a Tyler Algier where you really need an injury in order for him to even be like startable on my team.
Yeah, I would put him in that range. I mean, I'd still take Jaden Blue, the chance of Jaden Blue being something in Dallas and working out. I would take the chance on obviously Bill will probably go even higher now, but I'll take like even like Kyle, like I talk about these two guys, but like Kyle Monungai and Roshan Johnson, like there's a chance that there could be early opportunity with those guys, and if there's not, then they're just easy waiver wire fodder that you can move on. Well, like The problem with holding on to a backup running back is that they're just going to be clog up your roster, and that's what he's going to do all year long until Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, which obviously I would say he's one of the highest risk players in the NFL, but there could also be a chance where he doesn't get hurt and you're just kind of like Blake Corum last year. You just have this guy sitting on your bench the entire time. So I'd rather just go with the guys who I can move off of quick. If they don't even have a role early on, I can feel pretty good about just getting off of them. So yeah, if I have Christian McCaffrey, I will probably be more inclined to get Brian Robinson Jr., but I probably won't take a whole lot of B-Rob anyways.
Yeah, I think he's definitely more of like a best ball target, and that's a if something happens type of play more so than he is a redraft target. And redraft, you could probably leave him on as a very, very far down the pipeline depth piece. Like you're talking RB4 or 5-ish, and I think that's that you're hoping for like something to happen to Christian McCaffrey. I don't think there's a weekly flex play at stake.
No.
But obviously, we talked about him being a potential first, second round asset. Let's also get into the drafts. A lot of people have drafts this weekend, Tyler.
Well, how do you feel about Bill now?
So when it comes to Bill, good question. When it comes to Bill, I feel like he's still not there yet. Like everybody wants to push him into now. This is Brian Robinson, like it's a rip and replace. I think it's Austin Eckler led backfield with JMC, with Bill, JCM, whatever you want to call him. And Chris Rodriguez are probably going to be splitting work. And I know people think Chris Rodriguez sucks, and he had his opportunity last year, but it's telling when Dan Quinn comes out and says, this is going to be our guy who has red zone opportunities. I don't think that's just coach speak. Like, why would he say that? And to give him first nod in the preseason game 2, it meant a little bit because it's like, okay, even if JCM has been the one playing well in camp, he's showing respect to the guy that came before him, the former JCM, the guy that was him last year. I think it's a split between those two at some point. JCM, Bill, he ends up taking over that secondary workload and maybe even supersedes Austin Eckler. But I think Eckler, who was just a top, he was considered a top player just 2 years ago. I don't think he's that far removed from being like an every down back. He played really well towards the stretch last year.
Yeah, but you just said that you could see JCM overtake it. So like, where would you take him?
I'm not taking. I probably won't take him a whole lot. He's like an RB4ish to me, like RB4ish. I'm not like highly interested in taking him. He's not going to be a pass catcher in PPR leagues, and you're waiting on him to get the red zone work. We don't even know if that's the case. We're just looking at the tape and the training camp footage and saying, "Oh shit, this guy, he's electric."
I'll say this. He's been, and I've mentioned this. I even wrote about him in my draft guide that came out like a month ago now, as one of the late round targets. So I've liked Bill for a minute, and the reason why I've liked him is because he's been talked up since rookie OTAs. And for me personally, like if I'm trying to think about the situation, this team could have easily moved off of B-Rob last year if they thought Chris Rodriguez was any good. In my opinion, Chris Rodriguez is who he is. Like, I don't think he's very good. I think they did this because they do believe in JCM. I think that they think they've seen enough out of him during training camp to believe that he can just be the replacement for Brian Robinson and now have, Eckler work into that role that he was last year. Now, would I take JCM where Brian Robinson Jr. was going? No, but I do think he belongs in that like round 10-ish range of like a Zach Charbonnet, where there is definitely upside here with JCM if he ends up being the guy that we wanted Brian Robinson to be last year.
See, I just think I think this is where like the actual knowledge of football comes. This is not a knock on your knowledge of football. This is just like a side thought. This is where I think like knowing what teams are doing also matters, because you can't carry 5 running backs coming into a year. And if you do like your 7th round pick, you need to clear up a roster space for him. Austin Eckler on a team friendly deal. You also have Chris Rodriguez on a team-friendly deal. You also have Jeremy McNichols, who came in last year and played really well in spot opportunities. That's 4 running backs that you're carrying, and you have Brian Robinson, who's now on a final year of his deal looking to get paid more. You're also trying to pay Terry McLaurin. Like, it just doesn't make sense, I think, financially. And when you got a guy who is playing well, you're like, shit, he's 80% of what we have in Brian Robinson. He's 100% of what we have in Brian Robinson. Whatever percentage, you can rip and replace that. And now I think there's opportunity for him later on. I just don't think it's this year. I think this is more of a financial move, more of a depth piece move than it was for anything else. That's my 2 cents on it. But
we'll see. I think he'll definitely be involved.
we'll see. Hey, he could be, and he could be one of those league-winning type players that you get later on in your drafts.